If you've ever played any kind of collectible card game, anything that had, intrinsic value to some of the cards to where both collectors and players would want them, you should know that not all cards are necessarily going to be appreciated equally or valued equally or even made equally. There are some card games where at certain times the demand for specific cards of a specific rarity will be completely outstripping any other card in the game. A perfect example of this was a few years back in Yu-Gi-Oh! When the cards Fossil Dynapachycephalo and Doomcaliber Knight were immensely popular in their ultra-rare forms, with some people asking up to $100 a single card for each of these. That's how in demand some of these were. And Dragon Ball Z is no exception. In Scorzy, there were some cards that some players just really did value over others, which necessarily didn't always relate to rarity or didn't always relate to the foiling, but instead the cards were just good, with Trunks' Energy Sphere being probably the most common example. In Panini's iteration of the card game, this still applies, with some cards just being much more in demand than others, especially for certain kinds of decks. You can see this most commonly with the ultra-rare cards, such as Defiant Challenge, I'll Dig Your Grave, and Spheres, which are always going to be in demand due to players always wanting to have access to them and their intrinsic value in a deck. However, the value of some of these cards is really up for debate between what players are willing to pay and what players are selling them for, and it begs the question, where's the cutoff point? Where is too much just too much? I'm Eric with Team Badman, back with another edition of Table Talk, and today we are going to address the question, when is a card too expensive? So no doubt if you've noticed recently, particularly after the advent of the Evolution set, that some cards just grew massively in demand and subsequently massively in price. Arguably the most common case of this was Sinister Choke, which jumped very quickly to $15 to $20 for one single non-foil copy of the card, and all the way up to $50 for one foil copy. More recently, this has taken form in the I'll Dig Your Grave card from the movie collection, which initially when it started came out about $40, $45 per card, which was completely acceptable for an ultra rare. But as the value of the card in the decks grew, so did the value on the market, bringing the card up to $70, even $80 a pop. Which, that's still somewhat reasonable when you consider that Spheres even now are going for $100 each. That's to be expected. More recently, it had come to light that some of the movie collection boxes were going to slow down and possibly even cease in production, which meant that some of the cards in the movie collection were going to increase in value. But none of these increased so much as I'll Dig Your Grave, with the card jumping to $110 to $120 for a single copy, and even now it is still sitting just barely above the $100 mark. This is applied for other ultra rares as well, with the value of Defiant Challenge climbing to $70 a pop. Spheres in their heyday going for almost $180 individually. And some of the other less valuable ultra rares plummeting hard, with cards like Villainous Empowerment, Heroic Assistance, and True Power going for as low as $10 each. Now the question this raises here is not so much how valuable is the card in the deck, but how valuable is the card really? Now when you consider the cards in the game at their very rudimentary level, all they are is ink printed on cardboard, and that may be a very kind of pessimistic way of looking at the cards, a very negative approach, and one that's attempting to devalue every card. And now I'm not necessarily saying that's the case, but I'm saying that when you consider how much you are paying for basically ink on cardboard, it can get kind of outrageous at times. And while some of the cards really do have inherent value, there really is a point where too much is too much. So let's take a look at some of these cards and really consider it. The most common culprit, which I've mentioned several times already, is I'll Dig Your Grave, which is a great card in itself. It does a solid amount of damage at 6 stages, it prevents endurance from being used for the remainder of combat, and if it hits, both players can be leveled one level at a time, which is especially valuable right now for both getting opposing MPs off of their most valuable levels, with a good example being Turles and elevating him off level 1, as well as leveling yourself to considerably higher levels, in which MPs such as Android 20 and Cell most certainly benefit from these. But considering, how valuable they are, there's still gotta be a cutoff point somewhere. While the card definitely has value in just about any deck, and it is a very, very nice 3-of, plus the chances of getting it in a booster box are still only 1 in 2 boxes, that doesn't really justify the card being $110 a piece. And I understand there are some players who want to buy them low earlier on, and now that they're selling high, they also want to sell them high in order to make a profit off of it. But after a point, it just gets ridiculous. This still continues to be the case as well with other freestyle cards like Sinister Choke, which is slightly more understandable because the odds of pulling a foil version of one of these cards is still considerably lower than that of pulling an ultra rare. While ultra rares are essentially guaranteed in 1 every 2 boxes, 1 in every 3 if you're talking set 1, the odds of pulling a foil version of these cards is astronomically lower when you consider that in every box the most amount of rares you could pull foil is 3, and when you consider how many rares that there are in the set and the odds of pulling one, it completely floors out. But that doesn't necessarily mean the card itself is worth $50. It's a good card, yes, and a shiny version of it looks really, really good in a deck, but why pay $50 for that? Consider what else you could get with $50. During the time when these were still selling at high, you could get a Defiant Challenge for $50, which is arguably a more valuable card in a larger number of decks than this single Sinister Choke. The case has gotten even worse with some of the Perfection cards now that the set has come out. When you consider the value of cards like Heroic Jab, Dashing Sword Attack, and Pesky Barrage, and you see the amounts that some players are paying, it's kind of outrageous. It's an uncommon card that players are willing to pay $25 to $30 a copy for. And I'm not saying that those players are making a mistake, and I'm not saying that they're fools for paying that amount, nor am I trying to single anyone out who's trying to sell the cards at those prices. Instead, what I'm trying to say is, consider the actual value of the card in the deck before you really consider what you're going to pay for a foil version of that card. I understand that a lot of players want to have a super shiny deck, and it's something marvelous to show off to your locals, to buddies at regionals, and it's kind of a status point when you consider it. And it's always been that way in card games. You've always wanted to have the foil version of a card over the non-foil version, or you've wanted the secret rare, the ghost rare over the super ultra rare version. I get that. I'm a culprit of the exact same thing, and I've paid some pretty outrageous amounts for cards myself. But at the same time, I look back at it and it's like, why did I even do that? Now, I know this is coming across kind of almost more as a rant than more of a discussion, but it's a really good point. If you look at Mr. Popo's Wonder Emporium, which is the Facebook group for selling cards, you will see some players putting up cards for a very reasonable price sometimes, and those will usually go pretty quickly. It's like, oh great, someone paid $40 for this ultra rare, or $5 a pop for this print 4 foil. That's awesome. But there are other players who try and charge really, really high, and if anything, you see them getting ridiculed for it. And I don't think that's what anybody wants out of trying to negotiate the card game. It's supposed to be for fun purposes. It's supposed to be for playing it and enjoying it with your friends. It was never intended to be, a business venture for individuals who are constantly trying to buy low and sell high and turn it into a very, rinky-dink business operation. And, I understand that, sure, that's going to kind of, make it seem like I'm reflecting negatively on the shops, and I'm not. But it should be up to the shops to try and sell the product and try to make the money, because that's what they do. They're the ones who buy the boxes, they're the ones who market it, they're the ones who put on the events, get the promos, host the regionals. They're the ones who should be trying to make the money. And when it goes into the hands of the players, it not only takes the power out of the hands of the shops, but it gives players almost an unfair level of leverage because they're the ones who eventually negotiate the market value of the prices. As players see, other players trying to sell the cards at considerably higher rates, if they make a very convincing point about it, you'll see those prices jack up really fast, especially if you're trying to sell on somewhere like eBay, where it's a very, very follow the leader kind of trend. And if they see a card sell for a considerably higher price than they're selling theirs for, they're going to try to spin that around and make a higher profit margin. And also, since I just mentioned it, Print 4. I understand that Print 4 is really shiny and it's really cool and it looks fantastic, and you want to have that really bright poppy foil in your deck compared to having one of the Print 1s, or especially the Print 2s, which there's a huge bias against in the community. But is that really worth jacking up the price 20 to 30%? The card does the exact same thing. The only difference is it's just a little bit shinier. It's like if I were to take a quarter, and if I were to shine it up really, really nice and make it, look almost platinum-like, does that change the value of the quarter to being anything higher? No, of course not. It's still going to do the exact same thing, just going to look a little bit better, and you're going to be like, ooh, I get to flaunt this off. But it doesn't really justify the price hike. There's not a single card I can think of from set 1 that really justifies a 25 to 30% price hike just because of this new foiling pattern. And yes, I get there are some that look absolutely fantastic. You get stare downs, which look amazing. You get the spheres, which look incredible. Overpowering attack, Krillin solar flare. There's a lot of these that look phenomenal. But, it's now the distributing standard is Print 4. And while you can still get some of the other boxes, you're more than likely going to get Print 4 if your shop buys the boxes, or if you decide to buy one yourself through the same sources that the shops will buy through. And that, it still doesn't mean that they're better. Doesn't mean they're really worth more money, are they? Now I apologize for, ranting like this and for making it sound, like I'm salty or really, really upset. But it's just been driving me nuts to go on to Mr. Popo's Wonder Emporium, or to try and buy cards on eBay, and you see these prices just skyrocketing, and I just got nothing at this point. It's really up to the player base to determine what the value of these cards are. I understand that, but there's got to be a regulating point. There's got to be a point where you say, this is ridiculous, this is too much, and it's ultimately up to the people to try and bring it down. So, if you're one of those players who has the cards and you're trying to sell it, you see the prices are too high, even if it may get you a little less money than you want, go ahead, try marketing it lower. Try selling at a lower price point, because not only will it sell faster, but it will also give the community a hint that the cards really aren't worth what they're trying to push them at. Ultimately, it's going to be in the hands of us, the community, to rectify this and to bring balance to the price points. I've spoken a lot about Mr. Popo's Wonder Emporium so far, and I really do need to give a shout out to PJ Bolin, who basically kind of runs the whole page, and who's certainly done a lot of firefighting on some of the ads for, players who've tried marketing too high and players who've ridiculed players for marketing too high. He does a phenomenal job at, trying to keep that balance and trying to keep it from being, a very salt-heavy and drama-heavy zone. So I absolutely have to give him props for that. I'm not saying to not foil out your deck, because everyone wants to, and that's just a fact of card games. It's something you can't help. It's something really cool to have, and it's always going to be a part of the market. So by all means, go for it. Foil out your decks. Buy, fancier, shinier versions. But at least consider what you're paying for. And if you're a seller, consider what you would pay for a card before you try and market a price that you want other players to pay for. Other players are just as interested in the cards as you. They're just as willing to pay money for them as you. But if you're trying to jack up the price outrageously, then, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm hoping that this video will give players, a little bit more influence to try and, really push for a new negotiation of prices, to try and bring the prices of, some of these higher cards down. And it's inevitably going to get higher as OP season rolls around, as new sets roll around. and that's expected. But you know, it's still fighting for a reasonable limit on these cards, and you know, I certainly know that there are some ads I just look at, it's like, I would never pay that. And you know, some of them you can just kind of leave there to just do what it is that they do and not sell, not do anything. But I mean, that's not really going to fix the issue of players trying to market the cards way too high. So if anything, it's going to be a fight on our end to try and renegotiate the prices and just try and make everything better. Once again, guys, you know, I'm sorry for kind of making this turn into a little bit more of a rant, but I know, like a lot of you guys, I enjoy this game. Genuinely, you know, love playing this game. I love being a part of this community, and it's something that I haven't felt in a card game in a really, really long time. And honestly, I don't want to see it turn into, you know, turn into a business, turn into this whole big deal of players, you know, just constantly trying to, you know, buy low and sell high, and turn into this kind of monopoly. Of course, you know, I'm never going to name any names because that's not who I am. That's, you know, really rude. But you know, I've seen it out of some players, and you know, I just don't dig it. You know, it's something that I would love to see fixed. You know, especially for the sake of the longevity of the game. It's like, you know, if you want a game where you're going to buy low and sell high, go over to Yu-Gi-Oh! You know, go over to Magic. I know for a fact that there are ins and outs of that card game where you can basically predict, you know, when cards are going to be worth a lot of money and when they're not going to be worth anything, and you can, you know, run with the ebb and the flow of the tide, and you can make a killing there. But you know, I'm asking on behalf of the entire community here, you know, don't do that with this card game. You know, it's one that's always been different, and I don't want to see the card game go down the exact same path. You know, I don't want to see it fall apart, and I guarantee there are a lot of other players out there who don't want to see that happen either. So thanks for watching this video, guys. It was really kind of impromptu, and a lot of it was off the top of my head, so I definitely appreciate it. If you guys liked it, click the like button down below. If you didn't, click the dislike button down below and let me know what you didn't like. I'll be sure to fix it for next time. Also, the subscribe button is down below. You guys know about that. Click subscribe if you like this so that you can find more videos like this. You know, more series that we've got, more matches. There's a bunch of stuff we've got coming that I'm really excited about, so I hope you guys will check that out. Lastly, all of our social media links are down below. You guys can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. So we would love to interact with you guys over there. So come say hey, like our page, subscribe to us, and whatnot. So this is Eric with Team Badman. It's been another edition of Table Talk, and I am signing out. And like always, guys, stay bad. Thanks for watching.